The theme for this week, life lessons from the mango. When it comes to a fruit being acknowledged with its own special day, National Mango Day in India, the mango is in a class of its own. Its diversity unmatched. Each mango season provides a symbolic reminder that nature and the things we cherish experience disruption, uncertainty, and change. However, all natural systems have a cycle with a beginning and a definite end. There is a last time for all things. With me today is author, speaker, certified city planner, and the mango lady herself, Tanya Wilson. How are you doing, my friend? It is an incredible joy seeing your face.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me. I am well. I'm excited to be a part of your show today. Looking forward to sharing my story from my mangolicious life.
Absolutely. Me too. So let's dive in here. The title of your book is Living the Mango-licious Life, Sips and Tips on Surviving and Thriving Beyond Seasons of Adversity. Tanya, what was the inspiration for the title of this book?
Oh, great question. The mangolicious life. So, Alan, I am a nature lover, an
Mm,
avid nature, and even more so, an avid mango lover. It's when you look to nature, you see that there are certain parallels between nature and our own lives. You know, there's a lot that you can learn about the way things are created, the way things grow and evolve. You can learn a lot about the seasons of life just from looking at nature. So I use the mango as a metaphor. It's a relatable fruit that so many people love all across the globe, whether you're from
mm,
Asia or Latin America, the Caribbean. Mango reigns as a king of fruit. But it's in the mango, you know, that we see that there's sweetness and there's succulence, but there's also a tardiness and a sourness. There's also the seasons when the mango is born and the buds are there and it
mm.
matures. And so it is with our own lives. You know, I think it's a great parallel and a great metaphor when we look about the seasons of life, and when we look into something even like the mango, that we can relate to the fact that life is bitter. It's
Yes.
also, but it's still a succulent life that's worth living. So in that, I've coined the phrase, living that mangolicious life. It's a sweet and sour life, but a life of resilience where you push on despite and you keep on living.
Well said. Thank you so much. When you reflect back to one of the most painful and traumatic seasons in what was then your young life, one that thankfully eventually morphed from much emotional bruising to the sweet forgiveness of your dad. How is the mango such a wonderful metaphor for what you experienced?
Wow. Yeah. So for me, and I shared this in my book, oftentimes when you look at an individual life, you know, an individual's life, we make assumptions. You know, we see a package that looks whole and together. We look at people who are affluent or successful, and we make assumptions, you know, that the road traveled was a road that was free of adversity.
Mm,
That's not the case for me, you know, and I mentioned the bittersweetness of the mango and the fact that it relates to the journey that many of us take in our own lives. I had to learn that lesson very early in life, Alan.
mm,
Very early age, you know, at the age of 6, my parents were divorced. And that shattered my world. You know, for me as a child, you know, coming home and seeing the devastation of the home. My father had vandalized our home.
mm.
I couldn't reconcile it. I couldn't understand how, at a place where I knew there was safety and there was love and there was a certain level of routine of joy each day, just overnight with no preparation, no explanation, my life shifted. Everything changed and everything shattered. And And the presence for me that created that shift and that pain and that shattering was my father. You know, my father's departure from the home and the level of violence that was brought with that departure when he vandalized the home on his way out. So I had to find a way to really echo that sentiment to folks that have been through that level of pain in early years and how they were able to carry on with life. You know, I saw that happen home. And Alan, the next day, I had to get ready, put my uniform on, and still go to school and still pay attention. I remember teachers saying, you know, you're distracted, you're not focused. And I'm like, yeah, my entire world fell apart. You don't understand what's going on. But it's at that age, Alan, I understood that life is not perfect, that things can change rapidly, that destruction can come upon you, even if it's not something that you have done or you've welcomed. But I also learned how to bounce back. I learned a great lesson. I remember there was a book that I read many years ago that talked about the fact that we can go through bitterness and we can go through pain, but it's important at some stage to come to the realization that carrying that level of anger and pain for other individuals, I think the author had said, it's like drinking poison and watching the other person expecting them to die. And I that because for me, for many years, I carried that anger. And honestly, I from my own father for the pain and disruption that was inflicted on us. And we weren't allowed to talk about it, Alan. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. The fact that even in families, when things disruptive happen, you're expected to be silent. You're not expected to speak about it. It wasn't until I wrote the book that I finally broke that silence in speaking about the feeling and the experience from a child's perspective of what we went through. And Alan, can I tell you, it was very cathartic. It was very finally just speak and say what we went through was traumatic. It was very difficult to acknowledge that the trauma that was inflicted upon us was caused by my own parents. You know, it was hard to reconcile that, but at the same time, say that in a spirit of love, not in a spirit of hatred or retribution. It's certainly a spirit of retaliation. But I will tell you, a big part of being able to overcome those difficult seasons of adversity is acknowledging the pain and coming to a place where we're able to forgive individuals for things that have passed. You know, so I have forgiven my father for what he's done in that season and the things that occurred. You know, it was a very difficult time in his life as well. And I know that he's grown from it. I know in many cases, he has mourned some of the things that was done. But you know, folks that have been through that and folks that have experienced childhood trauma, I will say that it is possible to overcome. It is possible to forgive. And a big part of your healing really comes from letting go. You know, a big part of that healing comes from being able to surrender that pain and realizing that you don't have to be a prisoner to that place and that moment and that memory, and you can have a life that's fulfilling beyond that episode. But it has taught me to be resilient. I never realized that a childhood trauma could have been a part of me learning how to bounce back and learning how to heal and learning how to move beyond that season, because it doesn't last always, Alan. That's the good seasons don't last always. We can relate through that when we look at nature and even at the mango, that things do evolve and they do change. And that's one part of my life I know that's made me the person today that I am, that I'm able to navigate difficult situations.
Wow. What wonderful victory. Talking about nature, nature is an amazing teacher if we're paying attention to what she's trying to tell us. Nowhere are her life lessons more evident than with the mango. Just as there is the perfect time to eat it, the perfect way, and in the perfect quantity, there was a perfect time for your mama nurse to show up as your daughter Mariah was clinging to life. What life lessons did that season teach you?
Wow, another great question. Yeah, there's a time and a season under the sun. I think there's a scripture actually in the Bible that says that, you know, there's a time to Yes, in Ecclesiastes, there's a time and a season and everything in life. My daughter was actually born premature, Mariah, at 28 weeks. She was 2 pounds. She only weighed 2 pounds. She had holes in
Wow.
her heart and the brain. I mean, an absolute mess. She came at a time when we weren't prepared. You know, we had read all the books that new parents typically read. My husband at the time, we had gotten ready thinking this is how things work. She's coming at 9 months. She's coming healthy. Nothing came on script. Nothing came according to the plans. Everything fell in place the way that it fell without our permission and without preparation. But in that too, something amazing was happening. My mother had actually retired that exact month. That was in February 2008. Little did she know that her retirement created room and preparation for her to be the biggest support that we would have ever needed in that. When I say there's a timing and an order to things, my mother was actually a NICU nurse. Her specialization is in, wait for it, premature babies.
Huh.
For years, I had heard her talk about how she worked with premature babies and her preparation and how, you know, her skill set helped to save the lives of hundreds of babies in Miami-Dade, that Jackson's NICU. But we would never have anticipated that grandma would have become the NICU nurse.
Right.
Child, and at a time when she would have been fully available to us. So newborn parents never had a child before, and having a critically ill child in the hospital, we were novices. We weren't experienced. We didn't know what to do. We were losing our minds, Alan, because every bad news got worse. I couldn't understand how bad news could get worse. You know, we were given a diagnosis one day, then the diagnosis got worse by the second time that we heard an update from the doctors or nurses. And there was one day that she came in and she looked at the baby and she said, Tanya, this baby is in distress. This baby doesn't look. I'm like, what more can I hear? I've heard the worst there is to hear. She was only 3 days old at the time. And remember, 3 months premature. So she was critically ill, very fragile, unable to deal with any disease or disruption. And my mother touched her abdomen and she said, this abdomen is distended. She started flipping through the charts. No, you don't do that because your grandma. But once a nurse, always a nurse. She's trained or attuned. She knows what to look for. She looked at the charts and she said, the centimeters are increasing. This baby's abdomen is distended. There's a problem. So she said, I'm going to call the nurse and point it out. And she pointed it out to the nurse. The nurses didn't realize because the shifts changed. Within each shift change, there was an increase in the abdomen. The area was infected and no one had picked it up. But my mother, being the 40-year veteran nurse, picked up that something was wrong with the baby. They called the doctor in and surely everyone was in alert mode. I mean, you talk about seasons shifting. Now they quickly whisked her off. They did examinations and they found out she had an infection in her intestines. She was only 2 pounds, a 2-pound infant that was critically developed an infection in her intestine, necrotizing endomitis. I mean, NEC is one of those very rare diseases, but for a newborn baby in ICU, it's a death sentence. Very difficult.
Wow.
If it had been undetected for even another day, she could have died.
Yeah.
So I think about those episodes and I think about those perfectly mistimed opportunities. So she retires from her tour of duty as a NICU nurse for 40 years. But at the perfect time, her retirement aligns with my area of need, where as a newborn and as a new mother, inexperienced, I would never have understood what was happening with that baby. But the eyes that I needed, the trained eyes, were in that room in the very month that she retired. And because of that, the baby survived. She went through 4 surgeries. She survived the NICU. She finally left there with just a bottle of polyvisol. Vitamins, and now she's 14 years old and she's rocking it. She plays the piano.
Wow.
She's an avid reader. Talk about a miracle, you know, but understanding that even in the seasons of life, God will equip us with the tools that we need to be able to navigate. You know, He will cover us and give us the support, not just in the family, but in the professionals, in the doctors and experts and people that come around us to make sure that we're sustained even in those difficult seasons. So that was a miracle beyond miracle for us. And we're so thankful that we were able to have our baby survive, and not just survive, she thrived.
Thank God for Mariah, and way to go, Grandma.
Yes. Right on
Oh,
it.
man. So a mango gone bad can be a metaphor for several things, including a toxic marriage with its bruises and mold, emitting the sour smell of decay and approaching death. If any of these signs start to show, it's time to discard the mango, or in the case of a relationship, the marriage. So, after the unimaginable challenges with newly born Mariah, on its heels was your breast cancer diagnosis, followed by a marriage gone bad, and yet you have victoriously renewed, restored, and refocused. How have you done it?
Holy cow. So there's a line in the book where I say life owes us nothing, Alan.
Right.
Sometimes adversity comes and gives you one twirl in the ring, but sometimes the twirl becomes two or three. And I think as individuals, we just have to recognize that life happens, things happen.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that you'll only get one twirl in the ring with adversity. And for me, I recognize that very quickly and at a very early age. So I already had my twirl at an early age with the divorce of my parents. And here goes life again, where I had at a very early age a premature baby. And my baby Mariah was only 1 year old when I felt a lump in my breast in February. She was just turning one, felt a lump, and I kind of dismissed it, thinking, can't be anything serious. And my husband said, maybe you need to just go check it out. You never know. So I went into the doctor and I had some tests done. The doctor said, this feels unusual. I'm going to have you do some screenings. But still, I'm thinking, what could it be? I'm only 30 years old. It could be anything serious. So I went in for my screenings. I did the ultrasound. Certainly enough, the ultrasound came back with abnormalities. So with the abnormalities, I had to have a biopsy done. And surely enough, the biopsy showed that it was malignant. I had cancer, had breast cancer. The doctor told me, you have ductal carcinoma. I didn't even know what that was. I've never heard that word before. It almost sounded Spanish, ductal carcinoma. And I found out very quickly I had cancer, and I had to make a decision. I had to decide what I would do with the treatment. Just very intense period, as you can imagine, with a 1-year-old special need child. So I'm talking about the complexity of life and the fact that your seasons can sometimes overlap, seasons of adversity. There's no guarantee come in pure order. And you're certainly not entitled to go through an adversity-free life. So I had these two calamities colliding at the same time. Talk about bittersweet and very bitter. And on the heels of all of that, my marriage started to pull apart. We became different people. It's a difficult experience to go through something like breast cancer, where you feel as though your body is not yours. It's been invaded. You're given a diagnosis where you feel that your mortality has now been threatened, and you're not sure if you're going to die. It does a lot to you emotionally. It does a lot to you as a woman, as a wife, and as a mother.
Right.
It pulled apart. I think my husband himself as well began to internalize things. I can't explain what he went through, but it definitely put a toll and a strain on our relationship. He had stopped working, unrelated to my breast cancer, but he had lost his job and had stopped working for over 5 years. So I became the breadwinner in the home, battling breast cancer, caring for a special needs child, on chemo, still fighting to keep a roof over our house. And he basically emotionally checked out. It was at a point where he stopped trying. And I think when you're in a battle together, the best thing you can do is have a mate that is fighting with you, and you feel like you're both armed for battle. We reached a point where we were fighting each other instead of fighting together.
Right.
The relationship just got very sour and very toxic, and it didn't help that I was sick in the midst of all of that.
For sure.
And you ask the question, what do you do when you're in those seasons? You find a place of refuge, Alan. My place of refuge became worship each morning, early in the wee hours of the
Mm.
morning. I had a place to really just get my mind settled. I had to find a place of meditation. I love nature, so I would find a way to escape to nature. Oftentimes, I would go hang with friends, but you have to realize when you're in those seasons that you have to choose you. So I chose me. I chose me in that
Yes.
moment, realized I was becoming a person that I didn't like. He was becoming a person that I didn't like. The home was becoming toxic in front of our children. And we decided, we needed to go our separate ways. But you realize that life doesn't always go in the order that's planned. You get married and expect to live for the rest of your days till death do you part. But oftentimes things can get sour and dysfunctional.
Yes.
But there's a I saw once that said, when respect has left the room, you should know that it's time to pack up and leave.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were at that point, Alan, that respect had left the room and we needed to pack up and leave.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
did, and I had to mourn that. The death of your marriage literally feels like the death of a person
Yes.
in your life. I
Yes.
had to mourn that and really mentally tell myself that I needed to choose me, and I had to be in a place of peace for my own health, my own sanity, for the peace of my own children. So that chapter for sure was one of the most difficult things I had ever been through. And again, with a collision of seasons happening
Wow.
in my lifetime. Yeah. But I'm here
Wow.
today. I made it through. And I've learned so many life lessons from that season that I still am able to glean from today.
Tough slugging, Tanya.
Mm-hmm.
Tough slugging. Walkers, we're going to take a brief break, but don't go away. I'm coming right back with Tanya Wilson and life lessons from the mango. We're back. The mango and its numerous seasons of life, from blossom to bud to harvest, as well as its extensive diversity, from the lesser known to the rock stars, has much to teach us if we're open hearted and teachable. So far, what has the mango, with its multitude of characteristics, taught you, my friend, about life?
Wow. Just a great series of questions. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I think the mango is such a relatable fruit. If we look at life, we realize that life has its own collection of seasons. There's no season in our life, Alan, that constantly bears. When you look at nature, it's the same. Nature doesn't constantly bear fruit, it doesn't constantly flower. There's a season in nature sometimes where you need to have rest. You see that the plants themselves, especially in the winter, that things go into a state of dormancy. That can happen in our own lives as well.
Sure.
And I Mangalicious life as the ability to be able to shift, the ability to be able to bounce back from the varying seasons that we encounter in our own lives. Whether it's a season of disruption because there's been a death in the family, whether there's a season of financial hardship, it's learning how to navigate those difficult seasons and still recognize it's still a life that's worth living. It's finding the tools. Hear that in the book, finding the tools to cope amidst the difficult seasons. We see that when we look at nature. We see that when we look at even a fruit like the mango, that the sour seasons don't last always, Alan. It's
Right.
having that there's still a bit of sweetness left in life, and that sweetness is worth us surviving, and not just surviving, but thriving beyond those difficult seasons. I want to encourage anyone out there that's listening. Sometimes you feel isolated and you feel like you are the only one in the world going through these difficult seasons. There are others out there like me who have been through difficult things, but I assure you that your best days are yet to come. I assure you that no season lasts forever. And I assure you that you can get through this. I want to encourage anyone that's listening out there. If I could get through the things that I have, I am absolutely sure that you can as well and that you will.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Humankind has so much richness to share with one another, to celebrate and grow from, if we will only open our heart so that our fears might be eliminated. Here, too, the mango in the process of grafting has much to say. An old expression says, two are better than one. That concept is the heart of grafting. This practice is used to produce several varieties of fruit on one tree. The different types of mangoes, each with a distinctive flavor and attributes, respond well to varietal grafting. What a picture! What speaks to your heart as I share that?
When I think about grafting, immediately I think about the fact that sometimes we get transported or we get transplanted from one environment to the next. Change can be a little unsettling. Change
Mhm.
can a little unnerving because we're not sure where we're going or where this new environment is going to take us. Grafting is the same thing. It's when you take one individual type or variety of mangoes and you fit it onto another host plant. And if it's done right, it will flourish and it will continue to itself, but it's being itself in another environment. That could be us sometimes, Alan. That could be us that sometimes God is going to transplant you either in a different profession, a
Right.
different office, different family. The geography could change. We just have to be open to the fact that sometimes that level of transplant or regrafting could take us from one level to the next. And if we
Mhm.
trust the process, Alan, sometimes if we trust the process,
Oh, yes.
is meant to harm us, could be something that is meant to heal us, something that's meant to elevate us, and it could be something that could be for our own good or for the good
Yes.
of others. So that's a lesson about change. What you just described about grafting is really a shifting and a repivot and a replot. I always say that only God can turn our burdens into blessings.
Right.
Sometimes it could be a blessing that you're looking for, but it's in another package. So be open to the regrafting and be open to the shifting because it could take you to the next point where you imagined in your mind that you could be, but not in the way that you expect to get there.
Well said. The final chapter of your book, Living the Mango-licious Life, states that there are so many lessons learned from surviving and thriving beyond one's seasons of adversity. In your book, you reference 5.
Mm-hmm.
Tanya, if you will, for our listeners, share with our, or for the benefit of our listeners, each of those, and do a shallow dive, maybe a minute and a half on each one.
Okay. So I think one of the first tools that we have to remember when we're going through seasons of adversities is to get a grip on reality. So I talk about getting a grip on the situation that you're in. I remember when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I went through a period of denial, Alan, and I went through shock, I went through anger. The stages were there. But in the midst of it, I'm thankful that at least I had the good sense to go in and get a follow up, to get a treatment plan, to have a
Right.
recommendation how I would deal with the situation. Along the journey, I've met other folks that have been diagnosed with cancer or other illnesses, and they stay in a state of denial. They stay in a
Mm,
state of anger, and what they fail to do is take action, or they sit on the fence. And I would encourage folks, in the first tool from the toolbox is get a grip on reality, get a grip on the situation, and make sure that you have a plan of action and you don't just file away what could be a critical thing that you need to deal with or find resolution. Whether
right.
it's your marriage, whether it's your health, do get a grip on reality.
Well
And
said.
the next tool that I share is the idea of finding refuge even in the midst of the storm. The house could be tearing down. You could be having issues even with your health. It could be a foreclosure issue. There's so many ways that adversity could hit us. it's always important to find that place of refuge, that thing that reminds you of who you are, that place that you find your greatest peace. For some people, it's meditation, it's worship. For some, they love to cook. You know, when they get in the kitchen, the world stops and everything is golden. For me, it was nature. It was escaping by the seashore and watching the shores and knowing that the sun still set every day. So
Mm-hmm.
find a place of refuge in the midst of the storm. Don't allow the storm itself to consume you. Have that place of escape that you can go on a daily, on a daily basis to renew your strength. The third one is beginning with the end in mind. So this one I took COVID, the idea
Yes.
that you should have a destination and a plan for your life. And the importance of that, Alan, is that oftentimes when we get into seasons of adversity, we get so turned around that we forget our goals and we forget to dream and we forget the desires that we had prior to going into that place of adversity. So it's important, just even before you encounter issues in your life, to have that plan of action of where you see your life in the next 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 years. Don't forget to dream. So I say begin with the end in mind, because in that season and the season ends, you still have a life that you need to continue to follow those goals and those aspirations. The other one is thinking about the mangalicious mindset. Constantly have that mindset in your life that even with the knocks and even with the stresses, you're okay going through the seasons. But what you're not okay doing is giving up on the hope in life.
Right.
I remember many years ago, I read another book. You can tell I'm an avid reader, constantly reading. I read another book. This one was by a psychologist, and she talks about that idea about grit. The book is called Grit, right? And she said, they've studied many times different successful people. They studied thousands of successful people to determine how did some people get to the level where they were high achievers in sports and in banking and medicine, different industries. And there was a common denominator that she found in successful people. Are you ready for it? Because I was shocked. She said it's not necessarily based on scholastic scores or aptitude or strength or congeniality. Here are the things that we think it's the jocks or it's, the folks that are in showbiz that do well. Angela Duckworth, the doctor, shared that based on the studies, they found that folks that had the ability to persevere and folks that had the ability to push on were the traits of successful people. Successful people, the underlying current that you find in most successful people is that mindset of perseverance. They continue to goal set and they continue to think and hope of better things and better ways to do things. So it's interesting that she described it as grit, because what I describe as the mangalicious life is that tenacity that keeps us going, Alan, that says, I don't care if I get put down, shut up, kicked, scarred, I'm going to keep pushing on. It's that mindset to never give up and to always feel as though tomorrow is a new day and I'm going to take this adversity and these issues day by day, step by step until I get to another point. I think sometimes we forget to celebrate those moments, even in adversity, the little wins that we have. But whatever it takes for you to keep that mindset of pushing on and pushing forward, those are the traits of successful people. So if you're going to be successful in overcoming seasons of adversity, get that grit, get that mangalicious twist, get that spirit, that feeling of overcoming and pushing on. Scientifically seen that it's the trait of successful people. We got that the mangalicious life works.
I love it. I love it. Did we cover the 5?
I think we covered the 5.
As you were sharing that last one, you reminded me of something that I read, I don't know, maybe a month or a couple of months ago. And the author said, if you want to succeed in anything, particularly something that you're struggling with at the moment, you want the formula for success? Here it is. Do it once more.
Wow.
Do it one more time. Whatever it is, do it one more time. And after you've done it that one more time, if that didn't take you where you want to get to, do it one more time.
That's it. Keep pushing on, keep pressing forward. we know that it's not just idle talk. We know scientifically, based on the studies that we've seen, folks with a mindset to never give up, never sit down, never shut up, just keep pushing on and telling
Yeah.
yourself, I'm not willing to accept defeat and I'm not willing to quit on my own self. Keep that mindset. It will help you survive those difficult seasons of adversity.
Tanya, you are an absolutely beautiful woman with an absolutely gorgeous spirit.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it.
It's
Appreciate.
it is absolutely true. Hey, it has been an absolute joy investing time with you here today. Thank you so very, very, very much.
It's been my pleasure. I'm so happy that my stories can be used as a tool to help to encourage others to continue to live their best life. And I will say that the best is indeed yet to come. So you keep living that mango-licious
Yes,
life.
ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right, Alan, be well.